banking ahead. Konechny tips it. He got it past the defenseman and gets to the puck. Konechny cutting it on goal. He scores! A beauty from Konechny, and the Flyers take a 1-0 lead. Beat the defenseman, then beat the goaltender. And then Konechny's third goal in the last 2 games has the Flyers on top.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 73. I'm your host, Isaiah.
I'm Dan the Flyer fan.
I'm Chef B.
All right. Yeah, we're back at you with a new episode, and we have a special guest. Let's not keep him waiting. He's from FlyersNittyGritty.com, Yariv Wolok. Yariv, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. Happy to be back. Obviously, I think it's been a little bit since I've been on the podcast, but no better time and happy on the show. Ready to talk about some hockey.
Yeah, and it looks like it's coming a lot sooner than later than it's been anyway, as we've gone through this very strange period. So, gents, we're going to open up here by kind of wading in, without going into too much detail, to what the NHL is looking at, what Gary Bettman, the commissioner, wants to do. I mean, after all, the details change every other day, so we just get a sketch of everything that's going on. And Dan, let me start with you. The NHL and the NHLPA Return to Play Committee has released a statement confirming the possibility that they could be moving into what they call a Phase 2 comeback sometime mid to late this month. And of course, everything's going to be subject to what the latest data is from the doctors, from the federal government and all. But what's your feedback, or what are you hearing in that regard?
Well, I mean, they're certainly going to try. I believe the NBA is shooting for the first day of June to start, letting people practice again and getting teams back together and such. And the NHL is obviously trying to follow suit. Obviously, like you said, the current situation that we find ourselves in is so fluid and changes every day that who knows. All it's going to take is a couple people to get sick and they're going to shut the whole thing down. So I don't know. They're going to try. That's for sure. Whether it happens this early or not, I don't know. Obviously, it's a day-to-day kind of thing, and depending on how different states continue to handle it, and as everybody in the country tries to open up again, if it goes well, then the hockey and baseball and basketball will surely follow. So that's the best we can hope for right now.
Yeah, and it appears that the idea is that since Gary Bettman, Yariv, is comfortable with starting the 2021 season as late as November or even December, in order to see through the 2019-20 season to its conclusion, that the league is going to have to make some alterations. Things are going to really going to be out of kilter, but they're really going to try and make this work.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I actually talked about this on my podcast as well, because it's, obviously it's a big topic of conversation, but, originally I was very much of the mindset of, just call the season a loss, let it go. It is what it is. It's a national issue, international issue. So it's not really much of a question, right? But as things have kind of changed and evolved, right, and I think there's still going to be a very conservative approach to all of this. I don't think anybody's trying to go gung-ho into any of these proposals, which I think is kind of why you keep seeing them, the date kind of slightly shifting, because I think they want to make sure everything's okay. But, I think there really is going to be that natural drive to kind of open it up conservatively, Get people get players at least into their practice facilities with their teams. Is that possible? Right? Is that alone possible to get the team at least practicing together? There's value in that alone, right? Can they do that safely? And I think that's kind of what we're watching, is we're watching a problem being solved publicly, which normally this stuff gets solved in the background. We don't really have that luxury today. So, we're watching them kind of, work through a process in front of us. But I don't think it'll be that bad. Initially, I was very much, let go of the season, just let it go. But I've kind of gone, we've gone through lockouts. We've been through problems. There's always going to be a risk of an issue, a national issue. It is what it is. So if we can get 2 seasons in, if we can do a playoffs and then get another season in, even if they're both not perfect, because we don't know. Jason Martinez brought this up. We don't know what's going to happen with this virus. It could spike in the fall, right? Like they suspect. And then we're going to want to delay it anyway into November, right? And that scenario comes up as well. So if theoretically a summertime is an opportunity to play hockey, I think a lot of us would jump on it because maybe there's another break around the corner. We just don't really know. So I like the tentative optimism and just, slowly working their way towards it. I like the slight aggression, but I to be honest, they have to be careful regardless.
Yeah. And Shep, a couple issues come up. You see the Flyers today talking about in a press release issuing credits for season games that I thought it was the last 6 home games that were not played, that they're willing to credit them toward the next season, and if they're having trouble making payments or things like that, they're being understanding. But it makes me think that they may not be coming back home in some venues, and they're still going to have to limit their venues. That's yet to be determined, whether each city, especially a place like New York, it's like an epicenter of this virus. It's like they're not going to be able to play there. We're going to have to play in more remote locations, perhaps, where there hasn't been such an outbreak.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my point. The whole thing is that most of this, everything that's happened, I mean, it's pretty much depending on where you live. I mean, we were hearing how bad Florida was going to be when this whole thing broke out. It was going to be like another New York, and it didn't happen, but it did. They did have their problems in the large epicenters in the South, like around Miami and all that. And then you have a country like Sweden that doesn't even shut down, and they left it up to their citizens to pretty much do what they were going to do, and that didn't break out like it did. So, but then you have cases like in New York where it exploded, and California where it exploded. So I really think they're going to have to look at, to what you said, the epicenters, these disastrous areas like New York and Devils, Rangers. I really don't know how it's going in Boston. I haven't really paid attention much there, but those large centers where they don't have a control over it, Philadelphia could be one of them. They just had like over 357 new cases today, I think. So they're going to have to sit there and find a way to go to maybe a neutral site. But I think they're willing to try to at least give it a try. I mean, the fiscal part of this is unbelievable. Like you said, offering credits for tickets, and hey, if you can't pay now or whatever it is, I think it would be a huge moral victory. And I know we don't like them too much in sports, but it would be a huge mental victory too.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that works out. Dan, a couple of things come to mind. Have they decided that they're going to skip the rest of the regular season, or do they need that revenue? There was somebody had a tweet thread where it said the NHL was very motivated to complete the regular season, if only because a number of markets have Fox TV deals, Nashville, Dallas, Carolina, to just name a few. And the terms on that indicate that Fox gets a real sweetheart deal to broadcast their games next year at little to no cost in the event of, the regular season games not being completed. I would imagine something like that could be up for negotiation. But to me, the rollback idea and going with points percentage and allowing more teams in the playoffs seems to be a more plausible idea.
Yeah, I believe the original, rumors, whether they did want to finish the regular season, but the fact that, over the last week or so, it's come out that they are hell-bent on doing the draft in early June. If that comes to fruition, then, there's no need to finish the rest of the regular season because, you clearly don't care about, positioning or anything like that. So, if they can roll it back to, a couple games ago and everybody, played the same amount of games and the point percentages or whatnot and go from there for your playoffs, and that's probably what's going to end up happening. It's clearly if they're going to, revert to the 2012 draft system and, you can only move up so many picks and it's only the top 5 worst teams that get to move up. And, if they are as concerned as doing that as it seems like they are, if that comes to fruition, then I don't see a reason why they're going to try to finish out the regular season. But yeah, the TV deals was always something that I thought was odd. That why they are going to skip right over the rest of the regular season if they're getting this big money. But there's probably even more money in the playoffs, and they want to get that on as soon as possible as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and that begs the question, Yariv. With the CBA up and the league and the PA in constant contact and apparently in the best of behavior on both sides, are very cordial meetings trying to work this thing out. I think that there's issues about why don't we try to get a new agreement now? But with that are issues that come up like compliance buyouts and stuff like that. But also, and I want to get your opinion specifically on Denver-based agent Kurt Overhard's idea, and something actually that I brought up with Jason Martinez last show, that there would be a NHL player exception, kind of like a bird exception like in the NBA, so you can keep the top players. And that kind of dovetails with trying to get a new agreement while we're going through this process. So I'm going to talk to Dan about an article that he did about compliance buyouts. But why don't you comment on the idea of the agent of having this player exception as an option that for markets that might be willing to pay a luxury tax in those circumstances?
Well, listen, to be honest with you, my issue with the cap in general is that one general rule, kind of managing all these variety of situations, right? You have all the legality issues of each state in particular. There's just so many issues with one general rule that runs across all teams that I'm open to a lot of things, if that makes sense. Like, I'm open to whatever needs to be done to get stuff done in the short term, even to get to a real contract. But I honestly don't suspect with the situation and with the economy that we'll have to go too down a road. I think most likely they'll probably try to just extend what they currently have. I don't know if everybody's going to be too aggressive. Maybe a short extension maybe is an option as well. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this topic, to be honest, but I do know that you have to be flexible in these times in particular, especially this type of economic uncertainty. And I think we're going to see that with some prospects as well, maybe even some free agency, like, willing to take a little less money just because, you want to live where you want to live, or, you just want to make sure you have a job because people are losing jobs left and right type of vibe. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I could see it happening. It's a time where I don't think people want to be that aggressive. Having said that, it's a lot of money on the table. So people also choose to pick their windows, and maybe this is an opportunity to strike and catch people in a position of need, right? Like the owners themselves. Oh, you want to get back. You're going to lose a lot of money each day you lose. That is an option, right? But seems unlikely to me. But I would say it could potentially be a business tactic. So I'd be open to all ideas. And I think if this agent out of Denver has a good solution, I think it's worth investigating, because we're going to need something in case something, pops up that we need to resolve quickly, because time off from a lockout on top of something like this is just unacceptable. And I think we could all agree with that point.
Yeah, I think they are going to have to get creative. I've heard through the grapevine that compliance buyouts, but especially with the revenue that some of these guys are hemorrhaging, is probably not on the table. But Dan, I did want to get to you because you did put out a very fine article today at Brotherly Puck, and maybe you could just run through the bullet points on that with regard to compliance buyouts.
Yeah, I remember hearing the rumor maybe about a week or two ago, that they were at least talking about it. And I thought that was a fascinating idea. Obviously, given the cap is not going to rise, it's at 81.5 now, and it's supposed to jump to 84, as high as 88. But, it sounds like it's going to be pretty flat for next year. And, that's going to affect a whole lot of teams that are counting on that, $3-4 million increase to bring in players, to re-sign their players. And it's going to affect the Flyers. This is not the Ron Hextall salary cap champions anymore that they once were. Yeah. And, now you got a couple guys on bigger contracts that need to sort themselves out. And the two guys specifically were JVR and Ghost that I talked about. And, whether to me it comes down to money allocation. If they are awarded compliance buyouts, do you want your third line left wing James and Riemsdyk making $7 million, or do you want that $7 million to go to Carter Hart and keep him here long term? And same for Gostisbehere. Do you want Gostisbehere here for 4.5, or do you want that money to go to Sanheim and Myers, and keep them around? So it just kind of dove into, the possibility of compliance buyouts and how the Flyers would, handle that amount. And no matter what happens here, I mean, it's a big ask for Chuck Fletcher. It's going to be a big test for him. He's going to have to play some 4D chess here to make this all work. Cap wise, there's, you got Carter Hart, Phil Myers, Travis Sanheim, as well as Couturier and Giroux, all in the next 2 summers here, 2-3 years that they're going to have to re-sign. So it's going to get real tight around real quick, and a compliance buyout would go a long way for the Flyers in their cap situation.
Okay, and if I recall, running through the article, you had a candidate.
Would be my target guy to get out would be James Riemsdyk. Simply, the cap hit is a little higher. I'm no fan of Shane Gostisbehere. I don't think there's much value there trade wise, but I think you could bait a team easier to bringing him in than you could JVR as far as just the cap hit alone. There'd be more teams that are willing to eat $4.5 million versus $7 million. So JVR would be my guy if I had to pick it myself.
Yeah, why don't we do a panel on that? I would tend to agree if the Flyers were backed into a situation like that, he'd probably be the guy I would choose, Chef.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way myself. And just to even, tag on, Dan tweeted out earlier about Ghost, and he was tweeting about that if the Flyers had signed him for his production over the last 2 years, their Flyers fans would be rightfully so probably losing their shit, I do believe is a quote. Those people would be going crazy that we wasted that much money on what we're getting out production-wise out of them. I mean, God, and Dan's right, totally right. I mean, because people were complaining about Justin Braun for, almost $1 million less, $750,000 less. They were complaining about signing Braun for 1 year. And now you still got Ghost for what, 3 more years left? So, but to the point, it will be easier to move Ghost than it would be to move JVR. And, then everything coming up ahead, you might have an expansion draft too within the next 2-3 years. So, yeah, I'm going to lean with JVR being your guy.
No, I mean, when you think about, Shane Gostisbehere and his contract, I mean, there's no doubt this year that Braun has had more to do with the Flyers' success than anything Ghost has done. And, yeah, he's got 3 years left after this year. Yariv?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to argue with the JVR argument just because even at the time that we signed him, we overpaid for him, and he's not a center, right? And obviously Hayes has that luxury. It's a very similar contract, but I think we all can agree that Hayes is a better two-way player, right? Even if JVR might end up putting up a couple more goals during the year, that's not really where the value is with the player. So ultimately, I would agree with the assessment. I don't think it would be easy contract to move. I think Dan brings up a good point with that as well. I don't really see another contract being an issue. I know that some people have that perception of the Ghost contract, but still, I think it's relatively cheap for what he brings. So I think it'd be really easy to move. I don't even know if compliance buy would even be worth it because you would get return on a trade, in my opinion. But overall, for somebody like JVRB, it would be a really tough trade to even work out, and probably would take a significant amount of time to even work out a trade of that type of value. So that would be an easy opportunity. I think we have plenty of players who could probably pick up the slack over time. So it's hard to disagree with the JVR one. But I do think an interesting point about the Ghost thing is, the replacement for Ghost, I feel like, is in the system already. And I actually think it's Cam York who is the X factor in that. I think it's Cam York in combination with the expansion draft, right? Because you have the expansion draft coming in. You guys mentioned it, right? We all know that Ghost is most likely a target, right? Maybe even likely to be exposed. We all know that. But if Cam York is available, I mean NHL ready, because that's who I see Cam York as. Not a Ghost replacement necessarily, but capable to play that role, jump into both roles on the power play, on the penalty kill. He'll eat up those minutes immediately. So that's how I kind of see it is. If Cam York is ready, then I think Ghost is kind of the X factor regardless, because it's a sheer numbers game. You have no choice. So, I think they're going to make moves anyway. And maybe the overall trend that we need to pay attention to, on top of what you guys are saying, because I think you all make great points actually, is that this team might be looking to make a move in general, even though we all feel very comfortable. Maybe they're going to look to bring in an elite name, maybe on the back end or the front end, move some of this salary around, and maybe move a guy like JVR for a guy who makes $10 million. I know it sounds a little crazy, but a guy who makes $10 million, but maybe has a production of 80 points a year. It's something to consider. I don't know if they're going to be aggressive that way. It's not necessary, but opportunities can get creative.
Well, listen, the Flyers won a cup in '74, but they had a big dip in production from Bill Flett. He went from 43 goals to 17. So they went out and get Reggie Leach. He comes in, he gets 45 goals. He gets 61 the next year. And so, when you feel like you're in your groove, you're in your window of opportunity, you never know. You can justify doing a lot of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and Dan, you mentioned earlier the idea behind the June 5th draft. There's so many tentacles of this. Let me give you an overview, and then, you can just riff on that, because there's so many aspects to this which are fascinating. This sounds like something Bettman really wants. And it might run into late this week or early next week before they vote on it and hammer it out. But I think a lot of this is motivated by what the NFL was able to do. And also by the idea that there's a whole bunch of scouts and people that might be shifting jobs that are on contracts till the end of the year. And then it gets all kind of mangled if you carry over some of these personnel. But I really do think it's more of a marketing thing to get people excited for the league just when the players are ramping up and going, hopefully, through some kind of training camp.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and I think the success of the NFL draft has a lot to do with it. And, that's the time of year when a lot of these, scouts' contracts are up and such like that. So there's more into it than just that. But, again, it goes back to, finishing the regular season, and it's hard to, kind of fathom a draft when there was no completion of the season. There's no completion of the regular season, as far as an order goes. So, I'm not surprised they're going to try it, and it puts some eyes back on the product, which would be, hopefully, soon before they restart the season in sometime mid-June. So I understand why they do it. I don't actually hate the proposal for it either. But at the same time, it just feels very rushed. It feels like they're, especially if they're so sure that the season's going to end, if they're going to wrap this up, with a playoffs and a champion, they'll at least have some kind of verdict there as far as goes. But getting out of the way, the NFL draft obviously went a long way into building this as well. But they're going to try, and it's entertaining. It'll be something to talk about, right?
Yeah, that for sure. Now they're going to have to go back to 2012 rules when only the bottom 5 teams get a chance to get the number 1 pick. And the lottery winner can't move up more than 4 slots. So I guess the way this works, as I'm reading from a couple of sources here, Detroit would have what, like a 57% chance or something like that. It's almost like Detroit and Ottawa would have an excellent chance of being number 1 and number 2. Yeah, Chef, you got more?
I thought it was like 42.8% chance of getting the first pick if you were finished in the last spot. And then like that number went down like I think it was like 7 or 8%. I do remember seeing, I'm trying to find it. I do remember seeing that number from that time was like 42.8%. I think something.
No, it's the other way. All right, I got Bob McKenzie. Now, while the worst team, the number 1 odds, had a 25% chance of winning the lottery outright, there was an effective 48.2% chance of the worst team retaining the number 1 pick. That is, either winning the lottery outright or having a team outside the top 5 win it. So that goes back to the lottery winner can't move up more than 4 slots. Yeah. So that's probably where you got that number. I'm glad those weren't the nuclear codes. But
hey, I remembered them. I might not have known what they were for, but I remembered them.
Yeah. Yariv, any other thoughts about the different multi-layered aspects of this little project that the NHL wants to seem to pull off?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many opportunities to rip it apart just because it's going to be a new thing that my thought is I'm excited personally on my avenue. I mean, I have this kind of personal saying, something I say at my job as well, but limitations create opportunities, right? It creates opportunities to solve problems. And one of the NHL's biggest problems, in my opinion, is broadcasting, dealing with the web environment. I think they've gotten considerably better at it. It's why you saw them sign a new contract. It's why you're kind of seeing them evolve. But I think this will push the issue a little bit. Like, I want to see another level of coverage when it comes to the draft, when it comes to just game coverage overall. And it might force the issue and then, kind of learning some new techniques. So I'm open to all of the issues that might happen from any option that they go down, down route with the draft, because I think, again, my attitude is I just want to see something happen. I don't expect it to be perfect at this point. So I just want to see, I would hope, at least at the end, that what they learn from what goes well in the draft, because I'm sure stuff will go wrong, that what goes well will make its way into, hockey as we know it. Because I think the coverage could use a little bit more. I think even the sheer idea I can't watch all hockey games. We have blackout restrictions and all this stuff. Maybe this will kind of push the move the needle in the right direction, give us a better coverage, more coverage of juniors, connect maybe more of the leagues together. This is the stuff I kind of hope that will potentially happen from this, but maybe wishful thinking.
Well, yeah, you don't know. I was listening to Dave Pagnotta this weekend on the Hot Stove.
Fourth period, yeah.
Yeah, and from thefourthperiod.com, as we are the official Flyers podcast for them, and he said something that's really just kind of made sense. He said, you can't give the fans, if they do this draft, NBC Sportsnet. It's got to be on NBC.
Yeah.
They need that exposure. If they're going to do this, don't put it on a dinky little sports channel when you're competing against Bachelorette reruns from 5 years ago,
You're not wrong.
But
and losing. and losing to it. I see my biggest thing is right now is even with the governments too. It's like, don't rush. You have the time. There should be a plan. There should have started a plan. As soon as, when I get to work in the day, I plan out my day. And I sit there and go, what am I going to do today? This is what we're going to do. And this is one of my chef that I apprenticed with had the best saying I ever had. And I take it with me everywhere I go. When you're walking in the door, you're working to get out of here. You're working to close. You have to have your plan. I'm more worried, like Dan said, it was rushed and all this, but also I'm on the side of Yariv where I want to see something because I want my hockey back. But what I'm worried about is as soon as they stopped this, they should have had a plan in place to say, okay, when they say we can do this, this is what we're going to do. There has to be measured steps of how they're going to open and how they're going to proceed forward. I just want to see a little more, I guess, structure or a little more direction from what's coming out of the NHL right now.
I think they're going through that. I mean, there's a reason why they call it Phase 2. I'm going to put my clinical pharmaceutical rep hat on here. And Dan, I'm going to ask you. You know, I read something by Kevin Allen. It was such a great point. It was something I was thinking about. You know, between 18 and 44 in New York City, the hospitalization rate was 0.01. The death rate was 0.1%. The players probably, save for, you know, a diabetic like Max Domi or an NFL offensive lineman who might be considered, you know, obese because of BMI, the players aren't at risk. But what about the coaches, the executives, the people that are up there in age? And it's like they got to manage that, because that to me is the biggest concern right out of the gate. You might not cancel a game because a coach gets sick, but if a whole bunch of them or executives get ill, there could be a problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of where this whole thing hinders on at the moment, is they're going to try, but we figured this out on the Angry Negative show the other day. I believe it's like 1,100 people between, you know, a 23-man roster for every team, and then being generous with 10 people between the coaching staff and front office per team. It's around 1,100, and that's a lot of people to keep safe for at least a month if they rush through it, you know, and if not, if they drag it out, if they do it regularly, in 2 months, you know, or somewhere between that. And the second one person gets it, what do you do? You know, is game over? Do you just go back to, you know, waiting again? Do you just push on through and hope that not a lot of people get it? You know, if one person gets it, what do you do? You know, and I think that's going to be the big question here. That's kind of been my question the whole time as far as restarting the season goes. You know, there's not a doubt in my mind they're going to try, but, you know, there's still the possibility that somebody gets sick. I mean, there were players in Ottawa and Colorado who had it. I believe somebody in Vancouver's front office had it. You know, I assume they're all good now because that was, you know, many weeks ago we heard about it. But still, you know, these guys are not immune from it. They may not be in the age category to get it, or may not be in the age category to perish from it. But at the same time, it's a big risk right now, and it's going to be the determining factor on whether this gets started back up or not.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have an aggressive testing regimen, and if somebody tests positive, obviously they're going to have to be quarantined. I mean, even someone as young as Andrea Helfrich, who I think is 30 or 31, the Flyers representative, what is she, a liaison?
Something like that. Yeah,
public liaison. She had it. She was in that 10% category that have the virus, have a rough go of it, but they don't need hospitalization. And 80% appear to have little to no symptoms, and then we know about the people that need hospitalization and get into real trouble. So,
Isaiah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Since you were in that, you have background in that field, wouldn't it make sense now to go through, since we know it's been into, we know basketball players have had it, hockey players have had it, probably not baseball or football yet, but who knows? Wouldn't it be safe to, wouldn't be the smart thing, I should say, would be to go and do an antibodies test for everybody out there that is going to come in contact with all this stuff. You think that we, you know, judging by, you know, tests that they've done in some other states, like, well, one out of like every what X amount of people had it. Do you think that like if the Colorado Avalanche, 2 players on that team had it, do you think that more of the whole team probably was exposed at some point and had it, and maybe their immunities are higher now, or maybe you don't get it again? And we don't know that yet, but it would make a better sense that if you tested everybody that was going to come into contact with this before you started, you know, practices or getting the teams back together, wouldn't it make more sense? Don't you think?
Okay, that's a little bit more of a complicated question than you might think. I was
Okay.
listening to Dr. Ian Lipkin today, and I'm not sure if he's a virologist or an epidemiologist. I think he's a virologist, but I could be wrong. Infectious disease, one of those. And he was saying they just isolate an antibody, and I don't want to get this, I want to stick with hockey, but just real fast. They just isolated an antibody that is resistant to the virus. So just because somebody's generating antibodies doesn't necessarily mean that they're definitely not going to get the virus if they were exposed. Again, that is what I get. Now, secondly, they finally came up with a standardized antibody test by Roche, which just got approved. So Roche has this test. It's going to take a while to get out there. Theoretically, there could be a herd immunity within a team. If a lot of young guys have it and they're all producing antibodies, but that means people are going to have to be exposed to the virus, and it gets really, into the weeds as to whether that's really a good thing or not, because they still could be vectors, and vectors are people that could spread the virus if they're positive, but they don't have symptoms, and antibody means they were already exposed to it and they developed a resistance in their own body. But again, there has been a mutation of the virus, even though that mutation is weaker than the original virus. And this is, like, as Dan was talking about other issues, this is also a very fluid situation. And what I say today, next week you could read something else. So the antibody test is very important, but right now there's just not enough information. I think for the average Joe, it would be good to know if you were exposed. It might give you a feeling of just a little bit more reassurance, at least until the fall, when there could be a reoccurrence. We just don't know. A lot of that depends on what the exposure rate is. It was originally thought to be 3 people for every 1 person. Now it might be anywhere from 5 to 10 times that. We don't know. That's, goes back to the antibodies and all. But we're kind of drifting a little bit. Yariv, one of the other challenges, if we do this June draft, is how the heck in the world are we going to make trades? Obviously, we can't trade players on rosters, but, or if you did, then a guy got hurt. I don't even know how you work something like that. So it would just have to be like the NFL draft back when the Eagles wanted to trade Kevin Cobb, and they were going to get Patrick Peterson, but they had ended up with a second-round pick and lousy Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie. It's going to have to be picks or something, you would think.
Yeah, well, I think for the most part, right, it's going to be players who are non-playoff eligible, essentially, so, right, teams that aren't concerned if that player will play on their team, right? They might make a trade, but, a team like the Flyers, who are already in the position for a playoff race, most likely, they're not moving any roster players. So if that is the case around the draft, right, it's going to be a different year, right? It's just not going to be the same. Some teams will be more aggressive than they normally are, and some teams will be less aggressive. But I think with the fact that we haven't had hockey for a while, the rankings will be such a mess, and scouting will be not like blind to an extent, but how many games were lost, how many opportunities were lost to get an eye, to get a view on players, maybe to get a last look. And I think we'll see that reflected in kind of the draft this year. I think it'll be kind of a toss-up of who actually gets taken where, and a lot of players will probably slip, at least according to national rankings or whatever our perception is. And I think, because of that, all that uncertainty probably lead to a little less trades. I don't expect the most aggressive type of draft or off season just because of this situation. Could be wrong, obviously, but I just expect teams to kind of take their time, maybe focus more on moving picks, focus more on moving prospects, guys who are not at the NHL level, maybe not even at the AHL level, guys who really are not going to be affected by these trades, but maybe would be affected by the trade in a year or 2 years. The Flyers actually have a large plethora of those type of assets, so maybe that's where the Flyers choose to, make a move a prospect to move up in the draft, where maybe Ghost would have been part of a trade, or maybe JVR would have been part of a trade at the draft. Most likely, we probably wouldn't see that if they do play this summer.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, the NHL's Bill Daly tried to address that by saying they looked back over the last 5 drafts, and there were 106 trades conducted, and 64 would have been permissible had the draft been staged prior to the end of the season. I don't know what that really means in practicality, because now you're factoring in the salary cap decline or flattening out into the equation. So, and Dan, what about Arizona Coyotes GM John Chaika, who was caught testing USHL players, I believe, in violation of NHL rules. So they're going to have to take some draft picks away from them, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't. I'm keeping a close eye on that story and see what's going on there. But yeah, I remember they're going to do that. So if they take it away this year, and with the standings being as washed out as they are, do they wait till a different year and see what they're? I don't know. Who the hell knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what's going on right now, right?
Yeah, it really is a crapshoot. And the other part of it, I don't know how important this is under the circumstances, but the CBA does state that the draft has to happen in June. So, it'll be a very interesting scenario, very intriguing about how they're going to come up as part of a total package with the draft, the season, and everything. I would imagine they're trying to just knock it all out sometime this week or early next week. Any final thoughts about draft idea or anything like that before we move on?
Yeah, I guess my question to you guys would be, is there anything you think the Flyers actually need? This is something we talked about on our podcast. We had a hard time coming up with an actual need for the draft. Obviously, we can get creative. We can talk about moving cap. We can talk about, picking stuff up for, futures. But, for an immediate need, if you want to just think as a fan, we had a hard time. I mean, I think
they need a shoot first winger still.
Yeah.
That would be my choice.
That's the only thing we can think of, right?
Get me a 6'8" defenseman.
We have one. One day.
Who's not put together by with Band-Aids and chicken wire, unfortunately. Poor Sam. That'll be interesting to see what happens with Sam. There's certainly no pressure with him. He can take his time, and maybe I don't know what to say about him.
He's winning the Norris next year.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, listen, the thing with Morin, though, right, because of kind of his freakish size, I mean, health was always going to be a risk, his knees in particular. I mean, we see that with basketball players considerably. The amount of knee injuries they have. Obviously, he's not that big, but he is pretty scrawny, and obviously it's his ACL that's been an issue. So if he can get past that, which I think can happen, maybe as he stops developing, right? Maybe it's right now that maybe he can get past the injury bug, because it kind of came up as he was getting ramped up for the NHL. Prior to this, I mean, he was a pretty consistent, healthy player from what I recall.
Yeah, it's a freak thing. And
yeah.
But to have 2 ACLs in the same knee is really rough. So we'll cross our fingers for Sam. If he can play any role, even anywhere in the NHL, I'll be so happy for him, because it would be a great comeback story. Hey, listen, I mean, when he first got drafted, or whether it was signed, I think they signed him. I don't know if they drafted Dennis Seidenberg. He was hurt all the time. It took forever for his career to really take off. And then he was in Carolina, he was in Boston, and he carved out a pretty good career for himself. He was hurt a lot. Justin Williams, he'll give you help. He was really down and out. He had some really bad injuries, and look at him now.
Multiple knee injuries, yeah. He played till he was 40 or whatever he is now.
Amazing. So
he got better. It's like a fine wine, too.
Yeah.
He got better as he got older.
So you just never know. I mean, in this particular draft, it's the 2 guys at the top. What is it? It's Lafreniere. Was it Byfeld? Is that his name?
Yeah.
And then there's about 10 other guys, 12 other guys, and fairly deep, typical draft. I don't think, Flyers are going to be picking, Bill Meltzer said, the way things work, if they're proposed, they would be picking in the Brian Propp position of number 26. And, just take the best player available. They're not in a position to get a guy like Lafreniere. That's exactly what they would need. But
that's a late pick anyway. It's not like there's much selection at 26 anyway. It's definitely best player available at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crapshoot. I mean, who's a guy in Anaheim? Wasn't he a late the winger? Raquel. Well, he was a late high 20s.
29? Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, so he was if we get Ricard Raquel, I'm happy.
Travis Konechny, right? 24.
Yeah,
I believe. I mean, it definitely can happen, right? It's about, and that's kind of what was my point earlier. Travis Konechny was not ranked 24th in that draft, right? He was ranked. What's the other one? Detroit took him. Oh my God, the name's escaping me. He was supposed to be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it was not Larkin, was it?
No, it wasn't Larkin. It was a center a couple years ago. They took him and Kubina in the same year. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah, no,
but
I'm looking at it.
It begins with a V. Man, it's
escaping me right now. Valento?
Yeah. I think it's Valento. Yeah, Joe Valeno. Joe Valeno.
Right.
Oh my God. Thank you. All right, got it. So Joe Valeno, right? This guy was an exceptional player. Dropped all the way. I think he was taken at 30 in the end or something really low. Probably shouldn't have been, right? And that stuff, I think, could be at an all-time high this year. And that's what I mean, is maybe we get lucky and end up, taking a guy at 26. The Flyers are pretty notorious for this. And again, we're in a position of best player available, right? We don't have any need. So we just go for the best guy. So if somebody does drop to us, maybe we get lucky. Maybe not a top 10 guy drops to us, but maybe a guy who's in the top 15 drops to 26 for, kind of like a Travis Konechny situation, which is debatable. He's a top 10 pick, could make another jump for all we know. But I think this is a good year for that. And if we have good scouting, which I believe we do, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to catch some teams sleeping or maybe that weren't ready, potentially.
Yeah, or over ready like Chaika in Arizona. Working guys out. But no, I mean, the Flyers tend to like guys that close the season out strong like they did with Sanheim. So he was more of a riser on some boards. And the Flyers tend to like those guys because they're young, and if they're trending upward, they might have a bias toward those players if it's close between that guy and another player. But, Chef, what can you tell us about the Flyers signing of Linus Sandin?
I'm going to say it's good. By all accounts of what I looked into, he's going to be a half-decent player, and he's probably going to compete for a job next year, whenever they start, next season, I guess. So, I mean, a solid third liner, I think.
Dan, you had Bill Meltzer on your fine podcast, and he went into a little bit more detail about, some comparisons along a continuum of Michael Raffel's versatility, but like maybe a poor man's Oskar Lindblom in terms of the actual game that he plays.
Yeah, and that seems to be what he was going with. The play of Oskar Lindblom, you strip away the fancy offense, he's an extremely solid two-way guy. And, the Michael Raffel, maybe the early career Matt Reed, something along those lines sounds like, what we expect out of him. And quite frankly, that's what they need, gives them an option, a cheap option if they cannot get Tyler Pitlick back. And, guys like that may not seem serious, but they are crucial parts to the roster, as Michael Raffel has been for a long time. So you can never have too many guys that play that kind of role, especially in your bottom six. And if he comes in and is solid, and he's, if he's a little better than that, then it's an added bonus. So it should be an interesting thing to watch him, hopefully get some feet under him and play a big role for the Flyers next year.
Yeah, hopefully he'll fit into that mix with the aforementioned players. And then, of course, you talk about Yariv, Tanner Lazinski, and maybe Wade Allison, even though he's missed a lot of time. The Flyers think that he'll be also in that mix. You have a group of about 6 or 7 players that are going to be battling for maybe like 3 or 4 spots.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing about bringing in over Linus Sandin is, right, he's, a year older than Allison and Lazinski, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's about to turn 24 this month, right, I believe. So He's kind of nearing that same age. We have this whole group of window at that point. But, I mean, quite frankly, the Phantoms weren't good enough last year, and I think that's kind of underrated. And I think there's plenty of spots to fill there. And I mean that because last year, with the youth that we had in the talent, we just did not perform. We got our butts kicked last year, and I think that's kind of unacceptable for the level of talent we had. And I'm not saying it's any particular player's fault or anything like that. I don't know exactly what the issue was. I would actually argue it's maybe a veteran issue more than a youth issue. But again, maybe Allison, maybe these guys start off in the Phantoms, kind of elevate the team's game, and then you slowly see them trickle onto the Flyers. But no disagreement that Allison and Lashinsky and guys like Linus Sandin are definitely up there. And I think there's a lot to be intrigued with Sandin as well, just because of the jump in production. Again, undrafted, right? His brother has a first-round pick pedigree, right, with Toronto. I believe he was taken in the first round. Yeah, Rasmus Sandin. So could this be a guy who kind of got it together later in life? Potentially. He's not that old. And to put up 19 goals in the Swedish league, to lead his team, which is, a pretty good team, a successful team, and to be one of the younger players on the team, I mean, it's understandable why they kind of signed him out of nowhere. I know nobody really talked about him, but I mean, that alone on paper, from my understanding of the Swedish league and how difficult it is to score and to be a 20-goal scorer at that level, especially at that age, I think it's actually pretty impressive. And maybe he's as good as Allison in the end, for all we know. But it's going to be really interesting to see what he brings at camp, because he's another NHL body immediately that maybe even replaces a guy like Pitlick, who we're not sure if he's going to be around next year.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, just watching the video for what all that could tell you, he does look a little bit like Derek Grant or Oskar Lindblom in terms of his hands around the net, kind of tricky. Obviously, Derek Grant has only had like a couple decent years, so I don't want to get too premature with the kind of production that you're going to see from him. Although I've been very happy with that acquisition, and we'll see if the Flyers can whole league can get together this season, because I'm very excited about what the Flyers can do with the lower lines. And if they can't keep guys like Grant and, like Dan mentioned, Pitlick, who's been an exemplar of compete level for the whole lineup, they're going to need guys to come in, and it's good to have these extra options for the team. And Chef, what was your thought when you heard that Ivan Provorov is staying with his billet family? He's trained only 6 hours a day, and he has access to a rink. The guy's a warrior, huh?
I want him in my kitchen. I mean, that's dedication. The guy's a workhorse. Work 6 hours by yourself to be that motivated just tells you how dedicated and how good this kid is. I mean, he's dedicated to his craft. I want somebody like that working with me. So, I mean, I was very happy to see that and thinking, boy, if the game started getting played in 3 weeks, how far ahead of everybody else is he? I mean, he'll be skating circles around people, and I can't wait to see that.
That's one guy I'm not worried about. That's for sure. If they can make it back and make it happen, Provy's going to be putting in the time, and this break is just going to be gravy if they go deep into the playoffs. Dan, we got the latest on Oskar Lindblom and his status. He's sounds like he's entering his final treatments for the Ewing sarcoma that he has, and so far, as we cross our fingers and we knock wood, things have gone as well as could be expected.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I believe the last time we heard an update on him, they were hoping for a September, August kind of wrap up there. So if he's ahead of schedule, that's even better. Obviously you don't want to pencil him back in the lineup yet or anything. It comes down to just him being okay first and foremost. And it sounds like from all information that's been made public that is the case. So it's very good to see Lindblom is on the right track.
Yeah, and I would not expect to see him anytime real soon, because it'll take him a while to get in just walking around, feeling okay shape, and then there's that whole obstacle of being able to get into hockey shape, and it's going to take a while. I don't think we'll see him this year, but maybe in January, if touch wood, if everything goes okay. That's just my estimate. I don't have that on any special word or notice or anything like that, just so nobody misunderstands. But I've heard some other people speculate that he could be back in a few months, and it generally does not work like that. This is a very serious condition, and it's usually very aggressive, so you have to take some time out to make sure that there's not a recurrence. But so far, so good. And gents, I think that's all we have for tonight. Any final thoughts, Yariv?
Yeah, I mean, overall, well, just about what you said about Oskar. I mean, I think overall, I think it's a huge win. The fact that they said he's better than we expected. As soon as I heard that, I was like, okay, I can just sit back and at least take a breather, because that was my concern, at least personally. It was the health thing. I kind of got over him coming back pretty quickly once you start realizing, like you were saying, how serious this particular cancer really is, and you want to be hopeful and all that, but you really don't know. So the fact that he's doing better, I think, is already a win. If he can come back at any point, even if it's not next season, it's the following season, I think it's a monumental win. And I think it shows to the character of the player and how special of a person he probably is. I don't think anybody expects him to come back. So if he does, I think that's amazing. And I think that's what's awesome about this team, is that there's so many of these stories and these things to not relate to, but to hold on to. There really is a lot to love in this team today, where a few years ago, it was really, can we pick on Andrew McDonald a little bit more? When are we going to get the talent to compete? And now, even though this isn't a good story necessarily, right, it's a love for a player, right? It's not necessarily a frustration with a player. And it seems like that's actually a majority of our stories. So even though everything's kind of stopped and been really negative, there is some silver lining or positivity at least sprinkled within there. Yeah. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about an organization that went through the tragedies with Barry Ashby, Yannick Dupre, and Dmitry Tretichny back in '98. So just to name a few. Yeah. So we're ready for some good news there. But first, you have to live, and you have to live a normal life. And if he can do that, the rest is gravy, and we'll hope that works out. So, Yariv, FlyersNittyGritty.com is where you're at with our buddy Jamie Basco. And where else people can find your work?
Yeah, search for us on YouTube, Flyers Nitty Gritty on YouTube, obviously FlyersNittyGritty.com. We have a Twitter. You can find me on Twitter as well, YWOLOK, Wolok. You can find me on every single platform pretty much under that name, even PlayStation Network if you want to hit me up on there, play NHL 20 or something. But for the most part, that's how you can find me. We do videos regularly. Jamie likes to do pregame or just daily stuff. I have a player profile series to follow. Kevin Hayes is coming up next. I just did Phil Myers. So follow. And thank you guys. Really appreciate you inviting me on. And it was an awesome conversation. And I can't wait to talk about the actual season when it comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for doing this. And we'll check out FlyersNittyGritty.com by all means. Dan, you got a lot going on with Brotherly Puck and Brotherly Pod. You've had a lot of podcasts lately. One was personal to you with Curtis Gabriel and the Pride and the part of things are very personal to you. And you can find that being retweeted on the O&B Puckcast account. But, of course, what can you tell the people about where to find you and your work?
Yeah, in the Flyer fan, at Brotherly Puck, at Brotherly_pod. We had Bill Meltzer on the show last week. We had Curtis Gabriel on the show last night. You can check out those episodes there. Both the links are on the sites as well as the website. Plenty of articles coming up. The Thrashers Week for the top 5 players you forgot, as well as worst to first jerseys. So check that out. The couple other articles got stuff planned till at least the middle of June right now. So all kinds of stuff coming up. There'll be at least 3 or 4 articles a week over on Brotherly Puck. So be sure to check all that out, everybody.
All right, Dan, who was that number 1 Thrasher? It fooled me. Or do you want to tease that one?
It was Chris Chelios, I believe.
Played 7 games.
Yeah.
Chef, where can people find you when you're not at Steam Pub?
Oh, they can find me at Chef the Left B on Twitter. But boy, after everything Dan just said, I feel like I haven't been doing anything for the last 3 weeks. But yes, we are open at Steam. You can do online ordering. We have hot boxes outside. We have curbside pickup. We can bring it to you, park out in the parking lot. We'll deliver it to you to your car. Just text us when you're there. We have all kinds of stuff. You don't even have to, change money hands if you want to pay for everything online. We can do that. And, we still, and we have the small takeout store. Everybody forgets about it downstairs. That's where you're picking up everything. And we have beer and wine for sale, too. We can do that. So it's great. So thanks for everybody out there. It's been keeping us busy. We love you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of these businesses around your neighborhoods are not going to be coming back. That's the grim reality. But Steam Hub in Southampton has earned the right to keep busy with the fine quality food and service that you get. And they're on Twitter at Steam Pub. And, of course, you can reach me and yell at me at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520 at Isaiah _520, and the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter. And we're on various platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, YouTube. Check us out. And if you could do us one favor and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. Give us a 5-star rating if we've earned it. And with that, folks, hang tight. We're gonna monitor things and get back to you with the O&B Puckcast coming up as soon as we get some real good news from the league. Okay, everybody, take care and good night.